Okay, welcome to another vocabulary lesson. Today it's books. So, if a novel is riveting or engrossing, it means that you can't put the book down. It's fantastic. You need to keep reading it and reading it and reading it. Very similar adjective to the word gripping down here. Similar meaning. A poignant tale would be a tale, a story, tale means story, a tale which involves some kind of deep feeling of sadness or regret. An evocative journal is a day-to-day account of something, so it's like a diary. An evocative journal would be a journal which brings to your mind strong images or perhaps also inside of you strong emotions. If it evokes strong emotions or strong images in your head, it's evocative. Very similar to the word vivid, actually, down here. Okay, memoirs are memories. They're a collection of memories so about anybody's past, and if they're touching memoirs, then they are moving, which means that they leave they affect you deeply and perhaps emotionally. Maybe not sadness this time, but they certainly has a strong effect on you emotionally. So again, it's quite a positive word for if you're describing a book or someone's memoirs. Okay, an anthology is a collection of stories. So if you have a Sherlock Holmes anthology, it's a collection of Sherlock Holmes stories. If you have the comprehensive anthology, as I do downstairs, it means you have the complete anthology. It means it's complete. If something is comprehensive, all of them are included. Okay, and an instruction manual is what you get when you buy something new. So when I bought this microphone, I got an instruction manual, and I still can't use it very well, but I don't think I read the instruction manual actually. Okay, if something is enigmatic, it's mysterious. So an enigmatic account would be a mysterious account. Remember that enigma means a mystery. It's quite positive again. If the scenes are implausible, this is usually negative. It means that the book is a little bit contrived, which would mean unconvincing or unrealistic for some reason or other. So, for me, I'm not that keen on Agatha Christie, and I'm sorry, there's probably some Agatha Christie fans out there, but I remember one particular story, I think it was Murder in Mesopotamia, where at the end, the woman, we find out that she got married to the same husband a second time and didn't remember that it was the same guy as the first husband. I found this rather implausible, unrealistic. Okay, if the plot is fast moving, it means that it's not slow, it just keeps going and going, lots of action, lots of events. If a chapter, which is a part of the book, you have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, if it's gripping, then it's engrossing. You can't put it down. You've got to finish this chapter before you put the book down. The prologue is an opening to the story. It gives you a little bit of a background about the setting or the characters. And if it's haunting, it's scary because ghosts haunt you. If you read an epilogue, it's usually a conclusion to the story. It comes at the ending of the story. And if it's macabre, then it gives you some kind of fear, like the fear of death. Skeletons are macabre, or the Grim Reaper. Death is macabre. The setting is where the events take place and what time also. Maybe the setting is at the beginning of the 20th century in Berlin, who knows? But it could be an intriguing setting, which means it's interesting. It makes you... It's got some kind of mystery in there if there's intrigue. It's similar to enigmatic. Okay, a heavy-going explanation would be an explanation which is very difficult to understand and read. So, some philosophers, for example, give some heavy-going explanations and you just can't understand what they're talking about because they've got their own vocabulary. Okay, a thought-provoking narrative would be a story, because a narrative is a story, which makes you think a lot, and so it's quite positive. It just means that, it gets you thinking. Okay, to build up suspense means that the author is trying to increase the anticipation of the reader about the events and excitement about future events, and so it's the author's job to build up suspense in a lot of different novels. Okay, you can have different types of narrator. You could have a third-person narrator who it often means they're not directly involved in the story, but they are involved, they are there in the story, and perhaps they follow around one of the other characters. That would be a third-person narrator. You could also have an omniscient storyteller. Narrator is storyteller. Omniscient means they know everything about all the characters. Yeah, they're not just following one person around and they know about him. They know about everybody in the story. You could also have a narrator who is unreliable. So, in Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson is a very reliable narrator, perhaps, because he tells everything. He tells you everything as it should be, perhaps as it happens. But in Edgar Allan Poe, you sometimes have a narrator who drinks a lot, something like this, and is perhaps a little bit crazy, and that makes his version of events very unreliable. Okay, so you can have lots of different plot devices or literary devices in a story to make it interesting. So you could have, in a detective story, you can have a red herring where you think the author makes you think that the husband is the killer, and he leaves some evidence to make you think the husband is the killer. The evidence is the red herring. This is a device just to distract you from the real killer, who is perhaps the mother. And if the mother turns out to be the killer, this would be a twist, a surprising ending, an unexpected ending. And so very often in books and films you have a twist, something which surprises the viewer or the reader at the end of the story. Okay, if you have a flashback, you go back in time, 20 years or 30 years, maybe it's a memory, maybe something else, maybe it's just how the narrator explains a story. He starts at the end of the story and then goes back to the beginning. This would be an irregular timeline because it's not chronological. It doesn't start at the start and end at the end. If we have an allegory in a story, it's often a character who represents something spiritual, something abstract. So maybe there's a character in the story who is an allegory of greed, or maybe there's another character who is an allegory of corruption. Okay, an analogy is when you argue that two things are the same, even though they're actually quite different in every other respect. So you might make the analogy of a heart and a pump in order to explain how this organ works to students, because by analogy they are very similar. The heart does pump blood around the body. So this one's more dealing with an argument. It's not quite the same as metaphor or simile, which we'll look at. Alliteration is when you have the repetition of consonants, like Breaking Bad, b, b. You have the alliteration of the B in this title. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds, like doom and gloom. This is assonance. It's assonance, or it's the repetition of that sound, ooh and ooh. A euphemism is a way of making a bad word soft, so the euphemism of die is the phrasal verb pass away, which sounds much nicer, and so it's often the verb you use if you're discussing the sad passing of someone special. Okay, a metaphor is when you say that when you basically, if you say the man is a tiger, but you're using this sentence as a metaphor. He isn't really a tiger, but you mean that his actions or his emotions were like a tiger, and this is what a simile is. It's the same as a metaphor, but we use the words like or as. So if you say the man was like a tiger, it's a simile, and if you say the man is a tiger or was a tiger, it's a metaphor. So they're very similar, but you just use the word like or as in a simile. A pun is just a play on words, which often used to comic effect. So newspapers very often have a pun in the headline to make it more eye-catching and perhaps get more readers. A paradox is a self-contradictory statement. So it's like saying the Cretan said that all Cretans were liars. I can't remember what the name of the Cretan was in that paradox, but the Cretan is from Crete, so he should be a liar. But the Cretan said that all Cretans were liars. This is self-contradictory. It can't be true if you look at its own terms. An oxymoron is when you have two opposite words used to describe something. It kind of contradicts itself, like a deafening silence. Now that's a good collocation, but it's silly, isn't it? Because only loud things deafen you, not silence. But we do say a deafening silence. It's an oxymoron. It's got two opposite terms together. Onomatopoeia is when you have words which sound like they mean, like buzz. It means bzz, and hiss. So animal sounds are very often onomatopoeic. Okay, antagonist is the villain or baddie of the story. The protagonist is the main guy, so the hero of the story very often. An anti-hero is a guy who is bad in a story, but we respect for one reason or another. We like him, and so we'd call this an anti-hero. He's a baddie, but we like him. Satire is when you take a theme and exaggerate it for comic effect. So there's an old satire called A Modest Proposal, where the writer suggests selling all the poor children and eating them. And of course, he's not being serious. He's just trying to show how ridiculous social ideas about the poor were at the time. Okay, if the book or plot shows startling originality, it's fantastic. It's really new and original. It's never been done before. Maybe it has a gloomy atmosphere, which means, miserable, sad, depressing, dark. Maybe it has some very vivid descriptions which evoke strong images and strong emotions inside of you. Maybe it has very colourful characters, which means that the characters are very well drawn and vivid and memorable. They leave a lasting impression. Okay, that's all for today. That's a lot of words for books. I hope to see you all next time. Thank you very much for watching, and see you all soon.